Hi, kindergarten. Today we will read about types of tradespeople in colonial times. And as we read, we are going to use the details that we learn to identify the important information in the text. Now, repeat after me. I will use the details in a text to identify important information. Good job. Now, before we begin reading, we need to review some important vocabulary words. The first word is bartered. Bartered is something that is exchanged. So let's pretend that we're giving $1 to the storeman, and he is giving us the candy. I exchanged my dollar for the candy. The next word is blacksmith. A blacksmith is someone who melts hot iron and uses tools to make objects, such as horseshoes, tools, and cooking utensils. Let's slam our hammer on the horseshoe we're making. Now this is a make-believe hammer. The next word is cobbler. A cobbler is someone who makes shoes. Now we're going to take that same make-believe hammer and we're going to use that hammer on the heel that we're trying to put on our shoe. And that's what cobblers do. The next word is everyday, which means ordinary or that it always happens. Let's pretend we are eating a meal, like lunch, because we eat lunch every day. The next word is rare. That means that something is special, uncommon, or doesn't happen often, like a shooting star. So let's take our finger and pretend that it's a shooting star in the sky. Right? Because shooting stars are rare. The next word is tailor. Tailor is a person who makes and fixes clothing. Let's pretend that we have a hole on our shirt and let's try to fix that hole. And that's what tailors do. They try to fix the clothing. Now, as I read, I want you to think about this question. Who are tradespeople? Let's begin. A trip to town. Imagine you lived in the country long ago and were preparing to visit the nearest town. A trip to town was not an everyday event, or it wasn't ordinary. 300 years ago, there were no cars or trains. Your parents would have taken you by horse or by wagon, like you can see here on the picture. And the going was slow. Because you wouldn't have wanted to leave your animals alone or your crops uncared for at home for a very long time, trips to town were pretty rare or uncommon. If something is rare, it doesn't happen very often. Why might you have needed to go to town? Normally, everyone in your family helped to make most of what you needed on your farm. But there were a few things that your family couldn't make themselves, like iron nails or a new pair of shoes, or that would have simply taken too much time to make at home, like grinding wheat into flour or making cloth for a new shirt. Fortunately, There were different kinds of tradespeople in town who were specialists or experts at many of these jobs, jobs that couldn't have been done at home or that took too long. How would you have paid these tradespeople for things you needed? Farmers usually brought a load of goods to sell. People in colonial times did not use money like we use today. Or he might have bartered or exchanged some eggs or butter for the cloth you needed to make new clothes. If you bartered products that you brought from your farm, you swapped or traded what you brought for something you wanted from that tradesperson. You would not pay money. You would trade. Trade means to exchange. You may have brought along some vegetables or even chickens to trade. The first stop on your trip to town, at least in a large town, most likely would have been at the town square. Most of the shops and important buildings were located in or around the town square. Unlike the country, buildings in towns were closer together, which made it possible for you to visit several shops on the same day. The town square was the place where the mayor and the town leaders made speeches or important announcements. The town square was also where townspeople met to talk and gossip with their friends. This was how people learned the latest news. From the town square, you probably headed to nearby trading posts. This was where farmers could buy, sell, or trade all kinds of things. At the trading post or general store, you might have traded the vegetables for tools. At the trading post or general store, you might have traded the vegetables, grains, or dairy products you brought with you for tools, cloth, or supplies that you needed. If you were visiting a typical town in colonial days, here is where your trip to town would end. Most smaller towns had only one general store, a place where farmers could trade their crops to get basic tools and supplies they could not make at home. However, let us imagine that you were visiting a large town where you could see and do much more. If you looked near the river, which is here, you may have seen a mill, a building where wheat was ground or crushed between large stones to make large amounts of flour. Mills were almost always on the river because flowing water was needed to turn the huge water wheel that made the large flat stones inside turn and grind the wheat. If you had visited the miller, no doubt you would have brought freshly harvested wheat or corn from your farm for the miller to grind into flour. Once it was ground into flour, you would have been able to take it home to bake bread, cakes, and other good things to eat. Next, you may have stopped in the baker's shop and bought freshly baked rolls and bread. What a treat for your family! Remember how much work it was to make a loaf of bread back on the farm? Now, I want you to turn and talk. Why did farmers go into town? Yes, farmers had to make a long trip into town as it was not very close from the country. But that is not the main reason. Farmers went into town to barter or sell things. There were a few things farmers couldn't make themselves, or it would have taken too long to make. The tradespeople in town were the experts for doing those jobs. Remind me again, what does it mean when something is bartered? That is correct. Bartered means exchanged, or to give one thing and get something else in return. Some farmers bartered their crops, the goods that they grew, for cloth from the shops in town. Let's continue reading. Sometimes, if farmers had extra money after selling their crops, they may have visited the hatter for a new hat, or the dressmaker to buy a new dress for their daughter. Instead of buying cloth, you may just have bought yourself a new shirt from the tailor. A tailor is a person who makes or fixes clothing. And you would have had to visit the all-important cobbler, who is a shoemaker, who would make a new pair of strong leather shoes. The blacksmith was an important specialist in town, with his own set of tools and skills. The blacksmith built fires to melt iron so he could pound it into the horseshoes and nails that you needed. He also worked hard to make any of the same metal tools that you used back on your farm. In the busy town, each of these tradespeople and merchants had something special to offer people, just as you had much needed fresh food to offer them. For the next few days, you'll be learning more about some of these special people. Now, I want you to turn and talk again. Why are tradespeople important? Yes, tradespeople had special skills, knowledge, and tools to do special jobs. Tradespeople all had something special to offer people who lived in the country. What were some of the goods that tradespeople offered to people in the country? Yes, they would provide ground wheat, shoes, and melt iron. Today we learned some really important information about tradespeople in colonial times. We learned that tradespeople had special skills, knowledge, and tools to offer people who lived in the country, like grind wheat, make shoes, and melt iron. In colonial times, when families couldn't make things at home, they traveled into town for it, although this wouldn't happen every day. Most importantly, tradespeople were important because they were the specialists who lived in town to offer the things that families needed but couldn't make at home. Now, for homework today, you will use a piece of paper to draw. I want you to think, what might a farmer bring to barter or sell in town? Draw a farmer trading something from his farm for something in town that he needs. Remember to label your drawing with words or phrases. Submit your homework with a picture to seesaw. And remember, in colonial times, farmers went into town to exchange something from their farm for something they needed from a tradesperson. Now, get started with your drawing and put it in Seesaw. Until next time.